quiet coastal town, a mother's betrayal, and a little girl sold for the unthinkable.
The Chilling Case of Joshlin Smith. The full story.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Suada's Crime Files. I'm your host, Suada Conzonire. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm glad you found me. If you are a recurring viewer or listener, thank you for coming back. I appreciate you all. Today's case takes us to South Africa, to a story that shattered hearts and shook a nation. We're covering the heartbreaking case of a 6-year-old girl sold for her eyes and skin by her own mother. Today, we're heading thousands of miles away from the United States, across the Atlantic, to the southernmost tip of the African continent, to a country that has known both triumph and tragedy, a land of breathtaking beauty, painful history, and unwavering resilience. South Africa. Before we get into the shocking story of a mother who sold her 6-year-old daughter to a traditional healer, yes, you heard that right, I want to take a moment with my guest Elna to honor this land, to ground the conversation in the cultural and historical fabric that shapes South Africa even today. Elna is a resident of Cape Town. She followed this case closely, and today we sit down to unpack the case, the trial, and everything in between. But first, Elna, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Suada. It means a lot to be part of this conversation.
Let's begin by painting a picture. South Africa is often called the Rainbow Nation, and it's easy to see why. There are 12 official languages, including Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaans, and English. It's a place where indigenous traditions meet Western influence, and where community is everything. But there's also a deeper truth, a history of division and racial oppression that left its mark in every corner of this nation. And to understand modern South Africa, you have to understand apartheid.
That's right. Apartheid wasn't just segregation. It was a full-blown institutional system of racial discrimination. It was implemented in South Africa, starting in 1948, with the Nationalist Party's rise to power and the codification of racial segregation into law. This system of racial discrimination, where people were classified into different racial groups and treated unequally, lasted until the early 1990s. Black South Africans were forcibly removed from their homes, denied access to quality education, healthcare, and employment. They couldn't vote. They couldn't own land in many areas. Families were torn apart.
Apartheid really began in 1948, but separating black Africans from the white minority had long been a policy aim. Laws made white people officially superior, and the large black majority faced discrimination in every aspect of their lives. Living, doing business or owning land in white areas was banned. There were separate public facilities, transport and schools. Interracial marriage was banned. Many had no right to citizenship and were regarded as aliens in major cities. Instead, they were made citizens of Bantustans, homelands scattered throughout South Africa. But resistance grew. In 1960, a huge peaceful protest against past laws ended in a massacre at Sharpeville. 69 people were killed. The deaths galvanized opposition, radicalizing liberation movements like the ANC.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence.
The consequences were devastating. Communities were displaced. Generations were robbed of opportunity. And even though apartheid officially ended with Nelson Mandela's election in 1994, the effects linger to this day. You see it in economic inequality, in housing disparities, in underfunded schools, in the tensions that still bubble under the surface.
Exactly. But it's important to say this too. South Africans are strong, we are proud, and we are healing, slowly but surely.
And one of the ways the nation comes together is through sports. Let's talk about that, Elna, because South Africa isn't just known for its history. It's known for its heart, its teams.
Oh yes, sports are everything here. Let's start with rugby. The Springboks are national heroes. When they won the Rugby World Cup, again in 2023, the streets exploded with joy. People waved flags, strangers hugged, and it felt, for just a moment, like the whole country was united.
We are the world champs, man! Come on! Go Boca! Come on, Boca!
And soccer is big too, right?
Massive, especially in townships and among the youth. The Premier Soccer League is hugely popular, and during international tournaments, everyone is glued to their TV screens. And let's not forget cricket. Our Proteas team is competitive on the global stage and draws in fans from all walks of life.
Let's shift gears for a moment. Because if you're ever lucky enough to visit South Africa, one of the first things you'll fall in love with is the food. South African cuisine is as diverse as its people. You've got bubutea, a spiced minced meat bake with an egg topping, like a cousin to shepherd's pie. There's biltong, a kind of dried cured meat that's a national snack obsession. You can't visit without trying braai, which is South African barbecue that often involves a social gathering centered around cooking meat over an open wood or charcoal fire. It's more than just cooking. Braai is a cultural ritual.
And don't forget pap, a maize porridge that's a staple in many homes, or malva pudding, a sweet spongy dessert that's pure heaven.
Now pair all that with the country's incredible landscapes, and it's no wonder tourism is booming. From Table Mountain and Robben Island in Cape Town to the world-famous Kruger National Park for safari adventures. There's the Garden Route for road trippers and Durban's beaches for surfers and sun-seekers.
It's truly a traveller's paradise. But like any country, it has its shadows. And today, we're about to step into one of the darkest corners of this paradise.
In February 2024, a 6-year-old girl went missing from her home in Saldanha Bay. Her name was Joshlin Smith. What happened to her and who was behind it has shaken South Africa to its core. And the most haunting part? The betrayal came from within her own home. Coming up, we go back to the moment everything changed, the lies, the cover-ups, and the first cracks in a mother's story. Stay with us. It was a warm February afternoon in 2024. In the quiet seaside town of Saldanha Bay, just under 2 hours northwest of Cape Town. A community nestled along the west coast, known for its fishing, its working-class families, and its deeply connected neighborhoods. But on this particular day, silence swallowed the streets. A mother claimed her daughter was gone. 6-year-old Joshlin Smith, missing. No warning, no struggle, no trace. The country barely had time to process the news before questions started bubbling up. How does a little girl just vanish in broad daylight from her own home? Where was she last seen? Who was the last adult with her? And what exactly was going on inside that house?
Suada, the moment Joshlin's disappearance hit the news, South Africa went into full search mode. Volunteers, police, neighborhood patrols. It was all hands on deck. But the longer the search dragged on, the stranger things became. People started noticing how off the mother seemed.
You mean her public behavior?
Yes, her body language, her tone. In interviews, she didn't seem frantic or devastated. It was almost scripted, detached.
What was the initial story she gave the authorities?
Well, she told police that she had left Joshlin at home with her boyfriend, Jacquen Appollis, while she went to run errands. When she came back, Joshlin was gone. That was the story. But when police started investigating, they found inconsistencies. Timelines didn't add up. Witnesses didn't corroborate what she said. And something even more chilling started to emerge.
And that's when people started hearing about a sangoma, a traditional healer
Exactly. That's when the whispers started, about her connections to a Sangoma, rumours that Joshlin had been sold. At first, people didn't believe it. It was too dark, too horrifying. But then, Suada. The mother made a chilling comment to Joshlin's teacher. She said, "Joshlin is on a ship, in a container, on her way to West Africa." I mean, who says that?
That's not something any mother says, unless they know something, unless they've done something. The case intensified. The media descended on Saldanha Bay. Crowds gathered outside the family's home. Protesters demanded answers. The house that once sheltered a little girl now stood at the center of a national scandal. And as pressure mounted on the police and the public called for justice, secrets began unraveling.
That's when the boyfriend, Jacquen Appollis, and his friend Steveno van Rhyn were pulled into the investigation. Suddenly, this wasn't just a case of neglect or disappearance. It was something far more sinister.
A child was missing. A mother's story was falling apart. And whispers of ritualistic motives began to surface. Coming up next, we follow the police investigation as it pierces through lies, phone records, and local rumors, and edges closer to uncovering what really happened to Joshlin Smith. Stay with us. This case only gets darker. As the days turned into weeks and hope began to dwindle, the tone of this case shifted entirely. Joshlin Smith wasn't just missing anymore. The whispers of something darker, something sinister, became unavoidable. And as law enforcement dug deeper, the public was about to learn a truth no one wanted to believe. Joshlin may not have simply vanished. She may have been sold. Elna, at what point did police officially consider Joshlin's mother a suspect?
That turning point came when inconsistencies in her story couldn't be ignored anymore. Phone records didn't match her timeline. Witnesses came forward saying they hadn't seen Joshlin for days, even before she was reported missing. Then came the most disturbing lead, that Joshlin was allegedly handed over to a Sangoma, a traditional healer, for ritualistic purposes.
And that's when the public's horror turned into outrage.
Absolutely. For context, Sangomas are a part of many South African cultures. They are respected for their knowledge of herbal medicine and ancestral healing. But this wasn't traditional healing. This was criminal exploitation, using ancient beliefs as a cover for something monstrous.
And the testimony?
Suada. It was chilling. During the trial, it was revealed that the Sangoma had allegedly offered 20,000 rand, about $1,100, in exchange for Joshlin. And do you know what he wanted? Her eyes and her skin.
That detail is beyond words.
It shook this country, Suada. People were paralyzed. And during sentencing, the judge didn't hold back. He said, and I quote, "The mother was deceptive and displayed no indication of remorse or concern about her child's fate."
That level of detachment, that coldness, it makes it even harder to digest. Was there ever a confession from the mother?
Yes, finally. In court, Racquel Smith admitted to selling her daughter for the cash. Cold, straightforward, no emotion. And the most heartbreaking part? Joshlin has still not been found. There is no body, no closure.
Joshlin's teacher testified that the mother once claimed her daughter was on a ship, inside a container, on the way to West Africa. It's the kind of statement that shakes your soul. And yet, it came from the very woman who was supposed to protect her. A child lost, a mother betrayed every natural instinct, and a nation left reeling in horror. Next, we take you inside the investigation that led to 3 arrests. What did police find? Who cracked first? And what disturbing truths came from those interrogation rooms? We're only beginning to understand the depths of this case. Stay with us. After weeks of searching, dead ends, and growing suspicion, the investigation into Joshlin's disappearance reached a turning point. Police weren't just asking questions anymore, they were making arrests. Elna, walk us through what led to those first handcuffs being snapped shut.
It started with digital evidence, cell phone data, communication between Racquel Smith, Joshlin's mother, and 2 men from the area, Jacquen Appollis, her boyfriend, and Steveno van Rhyn, a friend of his. Phone records showed unusual activity, deleted messages, sudden cash deposits. Police traced it all. The thread was unraveling fast.
What was their initial reaction when they were brought in?
Denial. All 3, Racquel, Jacquen, and Steveno, claimed to know nothing about Joshlin's whereabouts. But their stories didn't align, not even close. One said she was at school. Another said she was with a family friend. A third mentioned she might have run away. But the truth couldn't hide forever.
And then came the interrogations.
Yes, hours and hours of questioning. The detectives kept applying pressure, and eventually, one of them broke. Jacquen Appollis was the first to show cracks. He confessed that Racquel had orchestrated the deal, that she'd agreed to hand over Joshlin for 20,000 rand, and that a traditional healer was waiting. That's when the horror of what actually happened began to come into focus.
Was there any physical evidence?
There were traces, burned clothing, smeared blood samples that couldn't be conclusively linked. The Sangoma's location was raided, but by then it had been abandoned. No trace of Joshlin, no final answers, just the haunting confession of a mother who traded her child's life for cash.
This wasn't just a breakdown of parental duty. It was the total collapse of humanity. The courtroom would later hear how Racquel lied, manipulated, and misled not just the police, but her own family, her community, and the nation watching in disbelief. And the question everyone kept asking, why?
That's the one question we'll never get a real answer to. Even after her conviction, Racquel never offered a true explanation. No remorse, no emotion. She once told an officer during questioning, "I needed the money," as if that was enough to justify the unthinkable.
This entire case has left permanent scars on Saldanha Bay and on South Africa. 3 people arrested, all charged with human trafficking, kidnapping, murder, and child abuse. And while justice was eventually served in the courts, Joshlin is still gone. Coming up, the trial that gripped the nation. We'll take you inside the courtroom, the testimonies, the emotions, the national outrage. We'll hear how the prosecution laid out the timeline of betrayal and how the defense crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. And we'll talk about what the judge said and why his words shook every heart in that room. You're listening to Suada's Crime Files. Stay with us. When the trial of Racquel Smith, Jacquen Appollis, and Steveno van Rhyn began in Cape Town High Court, it was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a national reckoning. South Africans had waited over a year for answers, for closure, for justice. Now all eyes turned to a courtroom where a mother, her boyfriend, and his close friend would face the full weight of the law. Accused of selling a little girl, Joshlin Smith, for just 20,000 rand, the equivalent of $1,100. Racquel, a 35-year-old mother of 3, walked into the courtroom stone-faced. No tears, no emotion. Jacquen followed, head down, while Steveno stood tall, arms crossed. Each of them charged with kidnapping, human trafficking, murder, and conspiracy to commit a ritual killing. And the most disturbing part? Joshlin's body was never found.
I was in court the first day. The tension, it was unbearable. You could hear people breathing. There were mothers in the back row holding their children tighter. Journalists were scribbling frantically. Everyone wanted to know how something like this could happen.
The prosecution began with chilling precision. They outlined a timeline, linking Racquel and Jacquen to a local Sangoma, or traditional healer, who allegedly expressed interest in purchasing a child for ritualistic purposes, specifically one with bright eyes and smooth skin. They presented phone records, text messages, financial transfers, GPS data. It showed Racquel and Jacquen meeting the Sangoma multiple times before Joshlin vanished from her Saldanha Bay home in February 2024. But then came the moment that broke the courtroom. A confession from Jacquen Appollis. In a recorded police interview, Jacquen stated that Racquel initiated the deal, that she agreed to sell her own daughter for ritual sacrifice. He said she had convinced herself it was just business. And when Joshlin disappeared, Racquel didn't act like a panicked mother. She lied to everyone, to her neighbors, to police, and, perhaps most cruelly, to Joshlin's teacher. According to testimony, Racquel told the school that Joshlin was on a ship, inside a container, on the way to West Africa.
That crushed me, Suada. Just hearing that. A mother suggesting her daughter was being trafficked across the sea like cargo. It was dehumanizing, cold, beyond comprehension.
And still, she never broke. When the defense was given the floor, their argument was threadbare. They tried to discredit Jacquen's confession. They claimed Racquel was manipulated, misled, that she didn't fully understand the Sangoma's intentions. But the judge wasn't buying it. Judge Nathan Erasmus addressed the court in a statement that would make headlines across the country. He said, quote, "This is not just a tragedy. It is a betrayal of the highest order. A mother who sold her own blood for profit. What disturbs this court is your utter lack of remorse, your calculated lies, and your indifference to the fate of a child who trusted you." He paused, then delivered the sentence. Life imprisonment for Racquel Smith, for Jacquen Appollis, and for Steveno van Rhyn. No chance of parole. As the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted. Some wept quietly, others stood and applauded. Outside, a crowd had gathered, holding candles and photos of Joshlin. They sang, they prayed, they cried. But through it all, one question remained. Where is Joshlin?
That's what haunts all of us. Even with these convictions, we don't have closure. Joshlin's body has never been found, and that makes it harder for her siblings, for the community, for the country.
During sentencing, the judge acknowledged this. He said, "The absence of Joshlin's remains deepens the trauma for all involved, but we cannot allow that to obstruct justice. Today we deliver what we can, accountability." It was justice, yes, but incomplete. Joshlin's story isn't just about one child. It's about what happens when systems fail. When poverty, desperation, and centuries-old superstitions intersect with a modern world still struggling to protect its most vulnerable. But something else happened in that courtroom too. A country woke up. Next, we'll explore what South Africa did next. The protests, the petitions, and the controversial debate around traditional healers and ritual practices. Because this case didn't just end in court, it sparked a movement. You're listening to Suada's Crime Files. We'll be right back. The courtroom had gone quiet. The gavel had fallen, and Racquel Smith, Jacquen Appollis, and Steveno van Rhyn had been led away, sentenced to life behind bars for the sale and presumed murder of 6-year-old Joshlin Smith. But for South Africa, it was just the beginning. Almost immediately, protests erupted across the country, from Cape Town to Johannesburg, from Durban to smaller towns like Worcester and East London. Thousands of people took to the streets holding placards that read, "Where is Joshlin? Protect our children. A child is not currency." The people were angry, not just at Racquel Smith, but at a system they believed had failed Joshlin long before she vanished.
Suada, the anger wasn't just emotional. It was righteous, because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. There have been dozens of cases where children disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and many believed it was linked to ritual killings or muti practices.
Let's talk about that for a moment. Because this case didn't exist in a vacuum. South Africa, like many countries, is a place where the modern and the traditional coexist. On one hand, there are bustling cities, tech innovation, and Western medicine. On the other, there are traditional healers, or sangomas, who have been practicing ancestral medicine for generations. But in very rare and extreme cases, Some rogue individuals use human body parts in what they claim are powerful rituals. These acts, completely illegal and condemned by legitimate Sangomas, are what authorities call muti killings, and they are terrifying. Joshlin's case reignited that fear. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Justice for Joshlin and Stop Muti Killings trended for weeks. Petitions were launched demanding stricter regulations on traditional healing. Others called for a national database of registered Sangomas and harsher punishments for those engaging in ritual-based crimes.
Even Parliament got involved. A few members pushed for legislation requiring Sangomas to be licensed and subject to routine inspections. But that opened a whole other debate about religious freedom and cultural identity.
Exactly. It became a battle between protecting tradition and protecting lives. Some communities felt they were being unfairly targeted, stereotyped as primitive or dangerous. Meanwhile, grieving families demanded reform, accountability, and better law enforcement responses. There was also criticism of the Department of Social Development. Many asked, how did no one notice Joshlin was in danger? She'd reportedly missed multiple school days. Her teacher had concerns. And yet, no one intervened.
And you know what's worse? Some people in Saldanha Bay claimed they suspected something. They just didn't want to get involved. That silence cost Joshlin her life.
The silence, that's what echoes the loudest. But from that silence came voices. Activist groups like Children First SA began hosting town halls, offering training to spot signs of trafficking and abuse. New posters went up in schools across the Western Cape. Counseling centers reported a rise in calls from young children afraid of being sold or taken. And though it breaks our hearts to say this, Joshlin's story may have saved others. This wasn't just a court case. It was a cultural earthquake. It made parents hug their children tighter. It forced schools to pay closer attention. It reminded the world that no matter how fast a nation develops, when the vulnerable are left behind, tragedy can creep in.
And even though Racquel and the others are locked away, we're still searching for Joshlin's body, for answers, for healing.
And so, the question lingers like a wound that won't close. Where is Joshlin? Coming up next, we take a deeper look into the search efforts, how far investigators have gone, the false leads, and the international alerts that suggest Joshlin may have been smuggled out of the country. A child still missing, a mystery unresolved. This is Suada's Crime Files. We'll be right back. Even with the convictions delivered and justice, at least on paper, seemingly served, one thing remains horrifyingly unanswered. Where is Joshlin Smith? Her body has never been found, and for her family, for South Africa, that absence is a raw, gaping wound that refuses to close. From the moment Joshlin was reported missing back in February 2024, law enforcement sprang into action. Search teams combed through bushlands near Saldanha Bay. Helicopters hovered over ravines. Divers explored the waters for days, then weeks, and now over a year, the search has stretched on.
I remember watching the news, Suada, every night, hoping for some kind of break, hoping that they'd find her, alive, even if the odds were against it.
And at first, there was hope. Neighbors claimed they had seen Joshlin with a man matching the description of Steveno van Rhyn near the port. A tipster said she'd been put in the back of a bakkie, a pickup truck, that was headed toward the harbor. Then came the most disturbing detail of all. During the trial, Racquel Smith admitted she sold her daughter for 20,000 rand, just over $1,000, to a man posing as a traditional healer. This so-called Sangoma allegedly told her he wanted Joshlin for her eyes and skin. Let that sink in. Not only was this child betrayed by her own mother, she may have been trafficked into a ritualistic underworld that many people still refuse to believe exists.
It's something we don't talk about enough in South Africa. Human trafficking, especially of children. Some people still brush it off as urban legend, but the truth is, there are networks, and they're very real.
Very real, and very well hidden. According to Interpol, Southern Africa has become a major hub for child trafficking. Victims are moved quickly, often through fishing vessels, informal ports, or hidden compartments in commercial trucks. They can disappear across borders without a trace, to Mozambique, Nigeria, or even overseas. At one point during the investigation, a chilling piece of testimony emerged. Racquel allegedly told a teacher that Joshlin was on a ship inside a container on the way to West Africa. Whether that was a lie to deflect suspicion or a tragic truth, no one knows for certain, but it changed everything.
It's when international agencies got involved. The South African Police Service requested help from port authorities, customs, and even reached out to Interpol for assistance in tracking missing child reports abroad. Still, nothing.
Despite posters in airports, Amber Alerts, social media campaigns, and interviews on national television, not one confirmed sighting, not one shred of evidence to confirm whether she is dead or alive. For many, the idea of not having closure is unbearable. But for others, especially her two siblings, hope is all they have. In the months after Joshlin's disappearance, community groups and child advocacy networks stepped in. They held candlelight vigils, launched balloon releases, organized search parties. There's even a mural painted in Saldanha Bay with her face, smiling, innocent, eternal. Joshlin became more than a missing child. She became a symbol of children sold, silenced, forgotten.
And now Suada, people are asking for more than just justice. They want answers. They want reform. Some are calling for a child crime unit dedicated to ritual-related crimes. Others are demanding a new task force on cross-border trafficking. Because if it happened to Joshlin, it can happen again.
That's the part that cuts the deepest. We may never know where Joshlin is. We may never recover her body, but we do know this. What happened to her must never happen again. At last, we reflect on the legacy of this heartbreaking case, what it's taught us, how South Africa is changing because of it, and where we go from here, because sometimes, even in the darkest cases, there's light. Next, Elna and I wrap up this conversation with some final thoughts. There are stories that leave a mark on you, and then there are stories like this. The kind that split a nation's soul wide open and force everyone to look, really look, at what we've become, what we allow, what we overlook. Joshlin Smith's story will haunt South Africa for years to come, but maybe that's exactly what needs to happen.
You know, Suada, before this case, most people in Cape Town wouldn't believe something like this could happen just a couple hours away. A 6-year-old sold by her own mother. It sounds like something out of a horror film, but it's real, and it's local. That's what makes it so unbearable.
We talk about justice, and yes, the court did its part. Racquel Smith, Jacquen Appollis, and Steveno van Rhyn are all behind bars, sentenced to life. The courtroom heard everything, the lies, the greed, the horrifying confession about selling a child for 20,000 rand. Judge Nathan Erasmus didn't mince his words. He said Smith showed no remorse, no grief, no urgency to find her daughter. And he was right. But even with the harshest sentence, the truth remains. Joshlin is still missing.
It's the not knowing that hurts the most. Her body wasn't found. No closure, no grave. It's like she vanished into smoke. People in Saldanha Bay still leave flowers for her. They light candles. They hope, because what else can you do?
And that hope is powerful. It's what's keeping the conversation alive, not just around this one case, but around child trafficking, ritual abuse, and the cultural taboos that too many are afraid to confront. This story sparked more than outrage. It sparked movement. Today, more parents are asking questions. Teachers are speaking up sooner. Activists are pushing for specialized units in the SAPAS that can handle cases like this with speed and cultural sensitivity. It's not perfect, but it's something. South Africa is a country with deep scars. Apartheid, poverty, inequality, they still echo. And this case, in many ways, reflects those fractures. How a woman, a mother of 3, could be so desperate, or so broken, or so corrupt that she would trade her child's life for a handful of bills is something we all need to reckon with.
We need to talk about mental health, about poverty, about culture, about systems that fail vulnerable families and children. Because blaming Racquel alone won't fix anything. It goes deeper.
Exactly. We can't just be angry. We have to change. Joshlin deserved love. She deserved a future, a first day of school, a birthday cake, a soft bed, laughter, life. And while her story ends in darkness, maybe, just maybe, it can lead us somewhere brighter. To our listeners, if you know something, say something. If you suspect a child is in danger, don't wait. Call authorities. Trust your instincts. Be that one person who speaks up. And if you're a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, be present, be vigilant, be kind. Because sometimes love isn't loud, but it's the one thing that could have saved Joshlin.
Thank you, Suada, for having this conversation, for letting me speak, for giving Joshlin's story the space it deserves.
Thank you, Elna, for your voice, for standing in truth, and for helping keep this story alive. This has been a heavy episode, but an important one. We'll be back next week with another true story that reveals the darkest corners of humanity. A wife swipe fantasy turned to obsession and murder. Until then, hold your children close. Speak their names, tell them they're loved, and never, ever look away. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Suada's Crime Files. If you found today's story gripping, please subscribe, rate, share the show, and turn on the notification bell so you're notified whenever a new episode is published. Follow me on YouTube and TikTok for short videos of this podcast's episodes. Type Suada Conzonire in the search bar. Subscribe to my newsletter at suadaconzonire.com. It's where I share the stories I don't always get to tell on the mic. Plus, you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Head to suadaconzonire.com and hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in your inbox. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.